Sherri here from On Point. Today I'm going to demonstrate how to cut a basic men's haircut. First thing I'm going to do is spray in a little bit of a leave-in conditioner. In this case, I choose to use a Jack Wynn product called Vitamin Silk. It just does a couple of things. It just makes the hair real pliable and smooth while I'm cutting, but it also keeps the hair wet so it doesn't dry out so fast. So the first part of creating a men's haircut is sectioning it off. We're going to section off right at the parietal ridge, and the way you find that is to set your comb on the side of the head and just kind of angle there. And where it wants to, like there's a little heel kind of right there, the head's a little bit wider, that's your crest line. I'm going to take a horseshoe parting all the way around, right below the crown area where all the calyx and stuff are happening, and exit on the opposite side. So another thing I like about using the leave-in conditioner is kind of helps hold the hair in place a little bit too. If the hairs are really thick and really coarse, I'll recommend adding a little bit of a mousse or a gel in there as well to kind of, as a cutting lotion, to help it stay in place. Okay. I've chosen to use a 5.5-inch shear. This is a shear by Hiroki. I will link it in the this episode notes at the end. So we're going to start on the right-hand side, and I'm going to move all the way to the center, and then we'll come back to the front and work the left-hand side to the back. If you're left-handed, you'll want to start opposite. Now, on a men's haircut, you want to be thinking square. So when I'm working on cutting my layers, I'm going to be pulling the hair straight out from the head, and I really want it nice and tight here on the sides. I want it about a finger width. So I'm going to pull it straight out from where the hair lives and just rest my fingers straight right there against his head. But I'm making sure that my fingers are straight. A good way to think about it is think about your fingers mirroring the wall to your right. And then just make sure that your elbow is up. See what happens when you bring it down, your bottom finger wants to kind of angle and it'll start to round. So be aware of your elbow and your fingers. It'll make a big difference on how the haircut turns out. So I'm just going to pull it straight out from the head and cut. And then I'm going to take fine sections as I work my way to the back of the head, take a little bit of what I just cut and take a bit of my next section and pull it out from the head, and I can see my guide through the hair that I'm going to be cutting. A key tip to keep your hair cutting on point is to first, like I just showed you, make sure you map it out. Second, be aware of your finger and elbow and body position. And third, make sure you take sections, find enough sections that you can see the guide that you cut previously. It's when you start guessing is when you start making mistakes. I'm just going to kind of come back here to the front. I like to double check myself before I move past the ear. Another key note to think about is to try not to cut past that second knuckle. When you get past it, you'll lose the ability to have tension on the hair, and you're going to end up having the hair a little bit longer there. I tend to have a little bit shorter fingers, so going back in and double checking is something I have to always do because I tend to get a little bit of a kind of a ridge here if I don't. So you can see, comparing to the sides, this is starting to skinny out compared to the left side. And I'm just going to continue on to the center at the back of the head. And once you get to the back of the ear, you're still taking vertical sections, but you're going to start, I'm starting now here in the nape area, being aware to keep my fingers against the scalp, not cutting past my second knuckle. Moving up right to the parietal ridge. Now sometimes it's hard to get in there, so having your client kind of angle their head will help you be able to get your fingers in there. Don't be afraid to move your client's head. I've been cutting hair for a really, really long time. And one of my first mentors that taught me the importance of not only our body position of us, but also your client's head. Because if they're not moving, you're not moving their head, you're having to move and contort your body. And that causes a lot of pain in the shoulders and sometimes the wrists. If you plan on doing this for a long time, don't be shy about asking your clients to move their heads. I tell my clients they're my personal bobblehead while they're in my chair. Now as I'm coming around to the back of the head, I'm noticing that he's got a lot of movement right here. So I'm gonna kind of extend that horseshoe parting that we did. I'm just gonna extend it just a little bit below. You can see how that wants to pop, and I wanna make sure I don't cut that too short. So I'm just gonna part that off, and I'll come back to it later. You notice my body position is to the side of my client's head, to the side of the chair. My arm is coming up over the head so that my fingers can rest comfortably and cut the hair to the length that I am desiring. There we go. Now before I move to the other side, I always like to go back through and check opposite of the direction that we were cutting. So I'm going to go back in horizontally, horizontally, but at a slight diagonal because the head is round. But just going through and making sure that I don't have any points there. That's looking good. All right, now we're going to come around here to the left side of the head. Here again, making sure that my parting stayed so that I don't cut above the parietal ridge. Now I'm standing in front of my client so that I can get my fingers in there. My elbow is up and my fingers are flush against the head. Again, making sure that my fingers are vertical. Putting in the walls, the sides of our square. starting to come around to the back of the ear. Again, being aware not to cut past the second knuckle. I think it's important when you're wanting to create a precision haircut is to work cleanly. So taking your sections and combing what you're not going to work with away, and then taking the rest and combing that away so that all you're working with is just that one area, or your focus rather is just on that one area that you're cutting. It really helps you not to get lost. Here we are at the nape. I'm standing to the side of my client's head. Elbow is up. If you notice, the comb I'm using has a thin side and some whiter teeth side. I like to use the whiter teeth side for my parting and for cleaning up, and the thinner tooth part of the comb to cut my sections. Enables me to have the tension I need. This particular comb, I will put the link in the notes as well. It is a comb that I get through a company called Jacqueline Pro. And I really like it because it's not a big comb at all. It fits perfectly in my hand. And it's got the nice little parting, that tip there that's kind of separate, makes for easier parting for sure. So if you are one of those that has trouble getting clean partings, you would love this comb. Now notice that I have my client's head down. That's a big one here, because if his head is up, my body shifts. But when his head is down, then my body stays the same, and all that's being adjusted is my fingers. And my elbow. Just kind of going back through here, making sure. And now we're in here to the center, so we're almost done the layering. Okay, now I'm going to go back through and double check. This side, I'm doing it with my palm facing out because I'm going back in opposite of the way I cut, and it helps me to be able to see what I'm cutting. It's kind of difficult to do this because my body will be all contorted. I mean, you could, but I find it a lot easier to just have my palm facing me and just pick it up. And clean up all those little hairs that I missed. Another key tip to remember is keep the hair moist. When it starts to dry, it shrinks, and you're going to end up with unevenness in the haircut. Okay. Okay, now I'm going to switch the tool that I'm using, and I'm going to use just a clipper, and I'm going to clean up around the ears and the nape. And when I'm working with when I'm going around the ears, I'm just going to be using this little outer part of my clipper, just the corner of it, just to, so that I'm able to get a nice round edge. If I went in flat, if I just went straight in, it's very likely you're going to cut into an area you don't want to cut. The first thing you want to do is to make sure you get the sideburns out nicely. I like to use a part of the ear to make sure that I'm balanced on each side. So right here on this little, turn this off, that little nubby right there on the ear, that's usually where I cut. And a slightly angled, like just a little forward diagonal, looks nice. So, and then taking your comb and kind of using that fine part of the comb and kind of pushing the hair forward. You can see how it kind of pushes it forward. I'm going to use just the corner of my clipper. My hands aren't holding it really tight. It's just kind of holding it very gently. If someone came up beside me and tapped the clipper, it would fall right out of my hands. That's how gentle that touch I've got. And I'm using my finger, I'm working with my right hand, so I'm going to take my finger and hold down the ear, and then use my two fingers, my pinky and my third finger on the other finger, or the other hand rather, to hold it down so I can get in here nice and close around the ear. And then right here on the nape, I'm just going to take it flat so I can get a nice side here. Okay. Before I move to the other side, I kind of want to take this sideburn in just a little bit tighter. So I'm just going to stick my comb in there, and it's touching his scalp, and kind of angle it out. And what that does is it's going to allow me to tighten it up there on the sideburn and having it kind of taper in to the layers that we cut, so that it's a soft blend. So here again, I'm holding in the comb. I'm going to turn it sideways so you can see it. It's not flush on the head. I've got it up to the head, and then I kind of angle it out. That way everything down here is going to be cut shorter, and it's going to go to longer. And it's always good to pull it forward here around the hairline. Use the tip of my clipper just to kind of clean it up. And then we'll move to the other side. Now this side's a little bit different. I'm going to angle his head so that I can see what I'm doing. Using my comb to push the hair forward and get that hair off. There's his little nubby. A lot of guys tend to cut their sideburns a little shorter on one side to the other, and this guy did as well. Just by the way, this is my husband Larry, everybody. He's my favorite model ever. And this side's a little bit different to clean up around the ear. So like you can see, I'm holding my right hand, I'm just kind of using my finger to push that forward, and then coming in here with my left hand to hold it, to hold the ear. That kind of frees you up so so that ear doesn't get in the way. And if you notice where I'm standing off to the side, kind of toward the front of his head. There again, I'm just taking the comb in there at an angle just so I can get a nice tapered effect. Okay, now I'm going to clean up the make area here. One little thing I recommend doing that kind of helps you keep it on your hair cutting on point when you're cutting the nape is use the mirror behind you. Like right now we're facing the mirror, and sometimes it's hard to see if we're even. So by stepping back away from it and looking at it from far away in the mirror, you're able to see how even it is. Okay, now we're ready to start the top of the head. Now we're going to transition into cutting the top. First, start by creating a guide in the front, or the bang area, or the frontal bone. Be sure to blend from the center to the sides where you cut. This will create a guide for you from the front back to the crown area of the head. Next, take a section and create a guide down the top center of the head. Be sure to find the apex, as this will help establish how long or short you're going to leave or cut the hair on the top. In a men's haircut, you want to make sure that it's nice and flat on the top. You want to think square. A good tip to remember is use your fingers and make sure that they're mirroring the floor below you. And I'm using a long shear, a 7-inch shear. This helps keep me disciplined in cutting a nice straight line, a nice flat line. I'm making sure that I'm standing in a square. My elbows are up, my fingers are completely flat, mirroring the floor. My scissors are mirroring my fingers so that I create a nice square shape. It's important to take the time to feel the head shape prior to cutting. That apex is very important. If you have a high apex, in order to create a square effect, you've got to make sure that that hair is shorter on the apex or the top of the head. Now I'm pulling everything up to a square from the crest line up. We've cut everything below the crest line. Now, go back through, being aware of your square shape and checking your cut horizontally. It's always good to go back through and check the opposite way that you cut. In this instance, we used vertical sections along the top of the head to create our shape. So when we're checking it, be sure to go back in horizontally. You can't see here, but I am using the mirror to check my shape as well. Now going back through, we're going to join the top section to the bottom section. Being aware that our fingers are straight and flat, keeping my elbow up so that I'm still maintaining that corner of the square. It's really important to be thinking about your body position when you're cutting a men's haircut, or any haircut for that matter. In this instance, I want to make sure that my elbow is up. By keeping my elbow up, it just automatically makes your fingers go flat, mirroring the wall across from you, and keeping you from rounding out that corner. Also, be aware of your client's head position. If it's leaning off to the side, it might throw you off on being able to create a really nice square shape. Be aware as well, in this instance, my client has a receding hairline. So I want to be very careful not to cut a hole there. So by taking the hair back a little bit and over directing it back to the hairline, it alleviates the issue of creating a hole there. Working in the crown area, be very aware of all the cowlicks and the swirls that are happening in your client's head shape. As I'm working around the head, I'm taking a little bit of the section that I had cut before and bringing it forward with me into the next section. This is called a traveling guide. It keeps your hair cutting skills on point so you don't get lost. Here again, be aware of the recession area. You can see here that I am pulling it back to my guide to maintain a little bit of length there so that I don't cut a hole. Next comes the detailing. I like to use a razor shear or a thinning shear to go back through and kind of blend that area at the crest line. A lot of times on men's head shapes, especially when they're mature men, when you go from the bottom of the head shape and start rounding through the crest line, that crest line area tends to be a little bit thicker. So going back in and just softening the lines and removing a little bit of weight keeps it from getting really bulky there. Just by taking the wide tooth of your comb and mirroring it with your shear and just kind of walking it up, softens any lines that you might see in the hair. In this instance, I do it because my client has turned gray, but he still has some dark hair in there. And dark against light a lot of times shows lines. So by using this little tip here, it kind of softens a line. Here also using it right around the hairline to just give a more sculptured appearance is very easy to do with a thinning shear. Be sure not to open and close that shear too much, otherwise you will create a hole. Here you can see I'm just continually moving, just kind of opening my shears once or twice as I move up the head shape and then checking it with my comb and stepping back and looking at it to make sure it looks good. I think it looks great. Thank you for watching. Be sure to follow me at On Point Hair Academy on Instagram and Facebook and my YouTube channel. And be sure to like